Hello, my name is Gemma and welcome to our podcast. Today we'll be discussing Chapter 4 of How Economics Explains the World by Andrew Lay. We will dive into the key concepts and ideas of the chapter, including economic growth factors, institutions and their influence on behaviors, misconceptions applying to poverty and policymaking, and influence on economic conditions.
How's it, everybody? I'm Tyra, and in segment 1 we are going to be discussing economic growth, the factors that can increase or limit growth, and the application in society. Andrew Lay introduces the idea that economic growth does not just occur because of consistent stimulation within the economy. People just going to work or utilizing resources that they have available to them is simply not enough. To grow the economy long term, it is imperative that governments invest in individuals, infrastructures, and institutions. Another key factor in creating long-term growth is promoting competition between businesses and breaking up monopolies. Investment in individuals can be seen through the creation and sustainment of economic programs or benefits such as EBT, Medicaid, and unemployment benefits. These programs assist the individual with issues pertaining to their life. Investment in infrastructure can be seen with mega projects such as constructing highways, bridges, and other important things that benefit the public by providing more efficient transportation, increased safety, and higher standards of living. Creating more routes and intersection public transit is an example of investing in infrastructure. The individuals in utilizing them, aka the public, are guaranteed a safer, more efficient form of transportation to and from their destinations. Investment in institutions can be seen with schools and universities, increasing the budget for these institutions, allowing them to offer more resources available to the individuals, aka the public, that are attempting to further their education. This in turn leads to more opportunities for higher level and higher paying companies and corporations to receive graduates from those institutions. The final key factor for promoting long-term economic growth is to promote a competition between companies. Monopolies are generally not good for economic growth, as it drives prices up and forces the consumer to consume less. Less consumption leads to less economic stimulation, which stunts growth. The government places and enforces laws and policies to discourage and prevent the monopolizing of industries, promoting competition for the benefit of the individual consumer.
In this segment, I'm going to discuss how institutions shape economic incentives. According to Andrew Lay, institutions shape economic incentives by determining who benefits from economic activity and how predictable those benefits are. His central argument in Chapter 4 is that people respond rationally to the rules in place, meaning institutions guide behavior toward either productive economic activity or unproductive survival strategies. The first way institutions shape economic incentives is by determining whether effort pays off. Lay explains that institutions affect whether workers and investors can expect to keep the returns from their work. When rules are clear, stable, and fairly enforced, people are more willing to take risks, invest, and innovate. In contrast, when rules are unclear or unfair, individuals have little incentive to go beyond the bare minimum. This idea directly connects to macroeconomics because expected economic returns drive investment, productivity, and long-run economic growth. The second way institutions shape economic incentives is through property rights. Lay emphasizes that secure property rights are foundational for economic growth. When people know their property and income are protected, they are more likely to save, invest, start businesses, and develop new ideas. On the other hand, when property can be seized or ignored, individuals shift away from long-term investment and toward short-term consumption or wealth hiding. This reinforces key macroeconomic concepts related to productivity, capital accumulation, and sustained growth. The third way institutions shape economic incentives is through legal systems and contract enforcement. Lay argues that well-functioning markets require trust backed by enforcement. Institutions that reliably enforce contracts reduce the risks associated with trade and cooperation. When contracts are enforced, firms are more willing to expand, specialization increases, and markets become more efficient. When enforcement is weak, economic activity tends to shrink and remain limited to small local exchanges. Lay highlights that contract enforcement allows markets to grow beyond personal relationships into larger, more productive economic systems. The bottom line of this segment is that institutions shape economic incentives by determining whether individuals are rewarded for productive behavior or pushed towards short-term, unproductive strategies. These incentive structures ultimately determine whether an economy experiences sustained long-run growth or stagnation. This graph helps visualize Lay's argument about institutions and incentives. When institutions are weak, even if people put in more effort, economic output stays low because the rules don't reliably reward hard work. But when institutions are strong, effort actually pays off. leading to higher productivity and growth. The key takeaway is that economic success depends less on how hard people work and more on whether institutions allow that work to translate into real returns.
Segment 3 discusses the concept that ideas are non-rival and promote long-run economic growth. Non-rival means that one new person's use of a specific product does not prevent other individuals from utilizing that product in the same or differing ways. Ideas are not set in stone and can be utilized again, generating compounding economic growth. We as a culture and a society expand faster when we share knowledge and collaborate, enabling innovation and technological advancement. Expanding society requires efficient forms of production with investments focused in human capital and technology. Continually upgrading production machinery and educating personnel are some of the best ways to increase productivity and efficiency. This in turn leads to higher values per hour of production. Blocking mergers and acquisitions within the Federal Trade Commission's power allows for a competitive business environment, leading to lower prices and influencing the consumer to purchase more variety. The continued fight between companies for the consumer's dollar will allow for further innovation and advancement.
In this segment, I'm going to address a common misconception discussed in Chapter 4, the idea that poverty exists because people in poor countries are lazy or lack motivation. Andrew Lay explicitly rejects this explanation. Instead, he argues that many poor economic outcomes result from bad incentives created by institutions, not from bad people. Lay explains that individuals respond rationally to the incentives they face. When institutions fail to reward productive behavior, people have little reason to invest, innovate, or take economic risks, even if they are highly motivated. This means that low economic output does not reflect a lack of effort, but rather a system that discourages long-term productivity. This misconception is important because it shifts blame away from institutional structures and onto individuals or cultures. Lay challenges this view by pointing out that people in low-income countries often work long hours under difficult conditions. Despite this effort, economic growth remains limited because the institutional environment does not support investment, innovation, or secure returns. From a macroeconomic perspective, this aligns with the idea that economic outcomes are shaped by incentives and constraints rather than personal traits. When institutions are extractive or unstable, rational individuals focus on short-term survival strategies instead of activities that raise productivity and long-run growth. The key takeaway from this section is that poverty is not caused by laziness or culture. According to Lay, poverty persists when institutions create weak incentives for productive behavior. Improving economic outcomes, therefore, requires changing the rules of the system, not changing the people within it.
Now we're going to be moving on to talking about historical divergence in institutions in Chapter 4. In this chapter, Lay explains that many countries did not start out very different, but over time, they went in separate directions. This is called historical divergence. According to the book, a big reason for this is the types of institutions that developed in different places. Institutions are the rules, laws, and systems that organize society, like governments, courts, economic policies. Lay explains that in countries where institutions protected poverty rights and encouraged people to work, invest, and start businesses, economies grew faster. Basically, some countries were set up with institutions that mainly benefited a small group of people, especially during colonization, where systems were designed to take resources rather than help the population. Chapter 4 shows that these extractive institutions cause long-term problems because people had a little incentive to innovate or trust the system. Lay also points out that once institutions are established, they are very hard to change, which explains why the effects of history still matter today. This helps explain why some countries are wealthy while others struggle, even in modern times. Overall, Chapter 4 connects economics to history by showing the past decisions and institutions strongly shape economic outcomes, and understanding this helps explain inequality between nations today. So we've talked about how history and institutions shape why some countries are rich and others aren't. But Chapter 4 also shows that governments do today really matter too. Policies, the rules and decisions governments make, like taxes, education funding, trade stuff, and business laws, can really affect how fast an economy grows. Lay explains that good policies give people the right reasons to work hard, save, invest, start businesses. But if the policies are bad, or the rules keep changing, then also if there's corruption, people don't really trust the system and growth slows down over time. It's also not just about short-term fixes. Countries that plan long-term usually do better. And this ties back to institutions because policies work best when the courts are fair, government's fair, overall no corruption, and when it's just stable. Basically, history sets the stage, but smart policy making can still help countries grow and improve over time.